Hey people, Sylvia's here. I'm on FDR. Yeah, it's been a little while. I don't do a lot of his videos. I'm here, in case anybody cares, up at the Edron Troll Place. Um, Simple stuff here. Anyway, so yeah, let's talk about some politics like I do on FDR. It's a lot more troll than I was expecting. I feel like hunting trolls, by the way, is like the perfect thing to be hunting when I'm talking about like a political topic. But anyway, let's ignore that for the moment. Um, So I've actually been planning on doing this video for a while. So my last video was on voter ID laws, and I actually wanted to kind of switch topics and not go to a specific point, but I wanted to kind of talk about the Republican Party in its entirety. Now, the premise of this video that I'm about to do is not an effort to like bash the Republicans, although it's certainly going to sound like that. Don't get me wrong; it's going to sound like I'm bashing the Republicans. So, like, you know, steal your heart, Republicans. It's going to be rough for you for a moment. However, the intent is not to do that. The intent is actually, you'll probably see the title of this video, but it's like I'm titling it something to the effect of like the 3 weaknesses of the Republican Party. So I actually am going to be talking about what I believe are the 3 weaknesses of the Republican Party to the best of my ability. So if you're a Democrat and you know, you're fighting Republicans, which I feel like isn't the outlook you should ever be having. Like, we shouldn't be having we shouldn't have a view of like this is a war where we have to destroy our opponent. But perfect world, I guess that wouldn't be the case, but real world it is the case. So we're gonna kind of go with it. So yeah, Democrats, this is can be used as this is your opponent's weakness. Hammer them at these spots. Republicans, this video can be used as these are our weaknesses. We need to either like attempt to remove these weaknesses or at least be prepared to defend these points. Got it? Alright. So like I said, 3 points that I see are like the main weaknesses of the Republican Party. So our first one is the obvious one. You guys have heard it. Everybody's heard it. Republicans have heard it. Democrats have heard it. Independents have heard it. Communists have heard it. Everybody has heard it. Changing demographics. It's killing the Republican Party right now. What do I mean by this? Well, the Republican Party has, and just like the Democratic Party, certain demographics that are more closely aligned with them. The Republicans, obviously, in an effort to like very oversimplify things, but the Republicans are kind of like the more religious people tend to be on their side. I want to say like middle-aged to like slightly older, like retiree aged white folks. Whereas the Democratic Party tends to be more on the lines of minorities, young people, poor people tend to go Democrat. It is a difference of ideas, and I'm not telling the Republicans that they need to change their ideas or something like that, because that would obviously be a pointless endeavor, and also just it's not even worth mentioning. But we have to understand that there are changing demographics in this country. More immigrants are coming in from all over the world. Generally speaking, poorer people tend to have more kids. So the immigrants that are coming in and that are, leaning Democrat are having more kids that are then going to be leaning Democrat. Whereas, the middle-class white folks tend to be really on that, 2.2 children, even less than that. And then a lot of their children end up going to college and becoming, a little bit more liberal anyway. But so I think that's the kind of problem is that the Republicans are facing right now, is that their current base is actually mostly shrinking due to the new generation kind of not taking up the causes of the old generation. And also then just generally due to the fact that one of the demographics that the Republicans kind of ally with are people that tend to be older and also sometimes not really all that healthy. So they're actually just kind of dying, and they aren't being replaced. So I don't know the exact numbers of whether or not the Republican Party is shrinking or is growing or is not growing at speeds it should be. I would say that the Republican Party is not... its growth isn't keeping pace with, population growth. So I believe, and I think a lot of other people kind of do too, that in possibly like 20 years or something like that, the Republicans will just be outnumbered based off of like a pure number thing. And that kind of gives the Republicans like two options on how to work with it. One way, which is after Mitt Romney lost in 2012, the Republican National Committee kind of came up with this research report of sorts to determine like what their problems were. And yeah, they kind of determined that they have a demographic problem. Like, Asians tend to be a little bit more liberal and lean Democrat. Latinos tend to get massively disgusted with the like anti-immigration and stuff that the Republicans kind of espouse. Which I'm not like disputing that, but I mean it's a fact is that when a lot of people that are very similar to you are being demonized by one of the parties, you tend to not really like that party all that much. Again, I'm not saying that those, like illegal immigrants aren't an issue or something like that, but you have to understand, people get upset about things. People aren't really always rational. They're not doing so great with women because of their, like, strong opposition to things like, providing contraceptive services and their attacks on Planned Parenthood and abortion and things like that. You might consider Planned Parenthood to be like a synonym for abortion, but it's actually not. Planned Parenthood does do other things besides abortion. So when you're constantly talking about, like, destroying that organization, you do have to understand that a lot of women use Planned Parenthood for purposes that aren't abortion. And when you talk about destroying that organization, they're not always happy about it. And that's for, like, women who are themselves opposed to abortion. Like, you're still kind of turning them off with that talk. As it is. So yeah, though, you're kind of, like, you're having some issues with that. Young people tend to be more liberal just in general, and young people kind of have a more, like, oh, whatever, let's just make people happy kind of a thing. So, like, young people don't really see the opposition to gay marriage, for instance, because it's just, like, it doesn't affect me. Gay people want to marry, what do I care? Let them get married. What do I care? And that's kind of the outlook that a lot of, like, young people have, is, like, they see it kind of, I would say they have some, like, a little bit more empathy. But young people kind of look at it and are like, well, I mean, like, I would be angry if I couldn't marry the person I wanted to, and I don't see any reason why gay people can't marry, so we should just let gay people marry. How simple was that? And that makes it rough for the Republicans on that sense. So, yeah, their demographics are changing. So the Republican National Committee, as I said, their report was basically like, we need to do some outreach to these groups. We need to try to, like, get the Latinos on our side, because, according to the report, a lot of Latinos also have a lot of, like, really strong conservative values, and if we play up their conservative values to the Latino community, they'll lean more towards us. The weakness with the Latino party, Latino, like, demographics, I should say, not the Latino party, is that they don't like the anti-discrimination talk that we do. So if we can tone that down and instead focus on the more conservative, like, family-oriented things that we do, they would like it. Okay. Well, that's one way that we could that the Republicans could kind of combat the changing demographic tide. The other thing, and this is the one that the Republicans actually as a whole went with, they kind of ignored that report and did not go with the whole we're going to try to branch out into these other groups. Now, the thing you need to understand is that when people vote, not everybody votes. A lot of people stay home. And I don't mean to say a lot of people stay home because they're sick or they can't get there. I mean to just say a lot of people are like, ugh, this is such a pain, and then don't go vote. Okay? For example, I did not vote in the recent primaries. Because I was largely like, I don't really care. I mean, whatever. Point is, though, a lot of people don't vote. We call this term, like, voter turnout. And voter turnout is one way that we can get additional people voting. Now, if only like 50% of eligible voters vote, and the population split 50-50, Democrats and Republicans, then, we'll end up with, have the population voting, because, only 50% in this, like, thought process are voting. So the idea is that in that like little thought process I just listed, it should be an even situation. So you could either like branch out into a. I'm actually getting killed by these trolls. There we go. So yeah, sorry. You can actually like branch out and try to pick up some of those, other demographics. So try to steal some of the Latino vote and make it so that maybe 51% vote for you and 49% for the other person. The other option is to increase voter turnout, which is instead of having only 50% of your eligible voters coming your way, try to raise it to 52%. So that way a little bit more of the population comes out and votes, and then you can still win on that thing. And that's what the Republican Party has been trying to do since actually before the 2012 loss. They're trying to rile up their base, get everybody really, really passionate, and, get them willing to come out no matter what. So instead of 50% people coming out to vote, they're trying to go like 60%, 70%. And this is sort of working for them. The problem is that they get... you tend to get a little bit more riled up bases, and the Republicans tend to do a little bit better on the Senate and the elections that don't involve the White House, I should say. So they tend to do a little bit better when it's not a full-on election year. So that's why they're able to control the House and the Senate, basically. Republicans lose that advantage, though, when it comes to an actual election year. When it comes to actual, presidential stuff. Which is unfortunate, but hey, it's how they've, been losing for the past 8 years. So what they're doing, though, is they're doubling down on a lot of the things that are riling up their base. And, that's kind of those hot button issues like abortion. A lot of people don't care about abortion. A lot of people are supportive of abortion. A lot of people think abortion is the absolute worst thing ever. Holy God, it needs to stop. So talking about abortion to those people get them furious. And then those people are willing to come out pretty much no matter what. It's the same kind of thing with gay marriage and a lot of these other topics. A lot of people are kind of indifferent. A lot of people are like, meh, it's not a big deal to me, but okay, let's let gay people marry because I don't really care. But a lot of other people are repulsed by the idea. Think it's the worst thing ever. And it's easy to rile people up like that and get them to come out to vote. So that is the approach that the Republicans are using. The rile up the base, increase voter turnout option. That's not necessarily inherently wrong or anything along those lines, but it is worth mentioning though that that's ultimately going to not succeed because eventually they're going to get to the point where 100% of available or eligible Republican voters are coming out to vote, and the demographics have still changed to the point where they can't even win with 100% of potential voters coming out. And that is obviously a problem. Now, I'm not really sure what the obviously the Republicans should try to expand and probably hold off on some of their more, irritating topics. Like I said, the Latino population doesn't really like their whole furiously anti-immigration stance. Donald Trump calling all, and Donald Trump is kind of bad for this, but Donald Trump calling all, Mexicans, rapists and criminals isn't really making all of the Mexicans here and their friends really, happy. They're not thrilled with that turn of events. Die, Mr. Bear. So you do have to kind of understand that's the situation we're having. So they gotta cool some of that stuff, but the problem is that those two approaches are sort of mutually exclusive. Toning down their anti-abortion stance, toning down their anti-immigration stance, toning down their anti-gay marriage stance would help them appeal a little bit more to moderates, to independents, and things like that. I'm firmly in the Democrat camp, and I'm firmly anti-Republican right now. But I do agree a lot with a lot of Republican stances and things like that. And if it wasn't for the fact that I think a lot of Republicans are sort of crazy, I would be a lot more inclined to vote Republican. but I'm being like completely turned off by a lot of their things. So if they lighten their stance on a couple of these topics, they would go a long way towards not terrifying, in other words. And yeah, like I could see them, snagging some of the moderate Democrats, snagging some independents and things like that. But as is, they're doubling down on the policies that they currently have, going towards them harder, which makes a certain amount of independents and moderates even more repulsed by them, which is the position I'm in. Like, I'm just like, oh, God, no. Oh, God, no. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's an issue that they have. The trying to rile up the base and increase voter turnout is a short-term solution that's ultimately going to stop succeeding. They need to somehow broaden their base, broaden their appeal to other groups. If they don't do that, they're going to have severe problems. So that is, in my opinion, the first problem they have. I think that was the opinion that most people can agree with me on. It's not controversial or anything like that. Now the other topic, and I don't really have a good way to explain this in a one phrase kind of thing, but when I went back to like abortion and when I went and was talking about like gay marriage, there's this kind of like feeling where, and this is where I'm going to have a really hard time explaining things. The Republican stance on a lot of things sounds at a glance unreasonable. And that's a problem because a lot of people only get that initial glance. Now, like, as I was saying with, like, gay marriage, the quick, off-the-cuff assessment that people kind of have on that falls into one of two categories. Either they're like, I don't see why it matters, and I thus don't see why we should make people upset by not allowing them to get married. That's the quick off-the-cuff assessment that some people make. The other quick off-the-cuff assessment other people make is that, ew, gay people, that's icky. And then they just don't like it. So, for the most part, though, I think, like, a lot of people are just like, I don't really see the problem, but, like, I see how people are being hurt by this, and I don't like that. It's kind of the same thing with, like, abortion. A lot of people are religious and see abortion as, like, murder. But a lot of people aren't super religious and don't see abortion as, like, a type of murder. So they see all the Republicans, like, trying to do everything in their power to take away abortion when it's, like, already a legal thing. Like, it already went to the Supreme Court. We've already got an answer on whether or not abortion's legal. And we see all these, like, very simple attacks on it and are like, I don't get it. And we see things like voter ID laws. By the way, voter ID laws, just tying this into my last FDR video, voter ID laws are one of the ways that Republicans are trying to deal with changing demographics. In addition to riling up their base, I kind of forgot to mention this, but in addition to riling up their base, their other option is to disenfranchise the other groups. If you can't get more Republicans to vote for you and you can't expand your base so that you get more Republicans just in general, your other option is to make it so that the other party doesn't want to get out and vote. Anyway, moving back to the unreasonable thing. And that's kind of like, other people see these, like, voter ID laws and, things like cutting hours for voting, making it harder to absentee vote, making it harder to just generally vote, making it so that there's less polling stations so that people have to wait in line longer. We see all of those things and are just like, that's not fair. And we, like, like, average people get angry about that. Denying climate science is one of those topics where, like, most people are dealing with the heat every day. Like, it's actually incredibly hot outside right now, and I'm already getting annoyed because I had to turn my air conditioning off to make this video. People see the deniance of climate change as silly. Like, it's obviously getting hotter. The scientists are saying it's obviously getting hotter, and if you look at it at, like, a glance, it makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that maybe I'm not saying, like, for sure that 100% I know climate change is a thing that's happening and all that jazz. But You gotta understand that, like, at a glance, off the cuff, it appears to be so, and the, like, steady fast denials from Republicans seem abnormal and unreasonable. And that's kind of where a lot of their positions, I think, end up coming off, is that the Democrats can almost just record what a Republican says about abortion and then just be like, and that is what the opposition is saying. They don't even have to have a stance. All they have to do is record what a Republican says and go, I'm not that. You know, in, what was it, 2012, I think it was, when, like, Todd Aiken, I think his name was, said that, like, he's opposed to abortion of all types, and they were like, well, what about in the case of, like, incest or rape? And he was like, well, my understanding of pregnancy is that that doesn't really happen in the cases of legitimate rape. So, like, right there, he kind of insinuated that anybody who gets raped and gets pregnant, it wasn't actually a rape, and that they were, like, enjoying it or something. Which is, like, kind of horrible. And then he kind of went on to say that, like, you know, he understood that, like, you know, when there's an actual rape, like, the woman's body has just safeguards to prevent it from getting pregnant. You know, and that's kind of the problem they have, is that, like, his opinion wasn't actually too far apart from what, like, actual Republicans sort of believe in certain ways. And, like, you know, independents, moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, people hear that and are just like, oh my god. This dude's awful. Like, is he crazy? Are you joking, man? And that's kind of the problem, is, like I was saying, you know, they come off as just unreasonable on positions like that. Like, that just seemed so incredibly unreasonable that it's hard to believe it happened. You know, like, I'm sure and, you know, that's, like, the thing with, like, gun control at the same time, too. Like, we keep hearing about all these mass shootings, and, you know, the kind of off-the-cuff response is like, well, maybe we should have less guns. And then Republicans are like, no, we need more guns. More guns in the hands of everybody. More guns everywhere, and that will prevent mass shootings. And that, at a glance, doesn't actually make sense. Your average person hearing that will not think, yeah, okay, we will have less mass shootings if there's more people running around with guns. They will absolutely think the opposite of that. Now, maybe that's true, maybe more guns will solve the problem, but it doesn't seem like that at a glance. And that's kind of the problem. It's almost like an issue of, like, public relations that the Republicans have. Their positions and their stances are very not designed to excite or make a not already aligned person like their positions. And that's kind of an issue. I'm actually going to pause my video for a second. 1 second, folks. Let me pause that. Alright. I meant to pause it so that I could, like, have my AC on for just a short period of time to cool it up a little bit, and also get something to drink. I accidentally ended the recording, though, so now I gotta, like, splice the videos together, which is a hassle. But anyway. Alright, so last topic. This is an issue with the Republicans, too. The Democrats, for the most part, are one similar blob, alright? Like, now, in an effort to not be like all Democrats and all Republicans are exactly the same or something like that, all Democrats aren't exactly the same. Certain Democrats have things that are more important to them than others. Like, for example, in my case specifically, I'm a little bit more, like, socially liberal. I think gays should marry. I think, you know, abortion's legal. And kind of things like that. I'm not really, like, you know, foreign policy liberal, though. I kind of like our big military and things like that. You know, so there's kind of that. I know, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. Different things are more important to other people. And that's kind of thing is that, like, I like Republicans more for their outlook on the world, but their social stances are such, like, a turnoff for me that I can't really support Republicans. But even then, like, on the more socially liberal things, like, I'm still pretty anti-marijuana legalization. Like, I'm not hugely, and, like, if it gets legalized, I'm not going to be like, oh, man, this is awful, but No, I don't think it's a good idea. And that's a topic I suppose we could talk about in another video, but not right now. But like, I guess that's my point, is that like I'm not perfectly aligned with my my Democratic brethren, and I don't think people should be either. Like, I don't think people should just like look at the party policy of like a checklist of things that are like, are we for or against, and then just a list of everything, and then be like, well, I'm on the Republican side, so I agree with every single thing on this list. No, you should have some differences, I think. And if you don't have differences, I kind of feel like your brain doesn't work. Like, you should have differences. It's, to me, the like natural response. But anyway, so the Democrats, I think, to a large extent, kind of come off as unified, we'll say. Like, even in my case, like, I'm not strongly anti-marijuana legalization, for instance. I'm just, I don't think it's a good idea, but hey, it's what happens kind of situation. And that, like, being allied kind of like that and unified is a strength to the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, though, is composed of, like, it's not like one nation, it's a alliance of two nations, in a sense. And one of those alliances, or one of those, members of the alliance, one of those nations, if you will, is the it's actually almost three, but I think there's two main ones, and the two main ones are the social conservatives and then the, like, governmental conservatives. So, and the governmental one would be the one split up more into, like, the, like, military-industrial complex. We could call them hawks, if you will. And then also into the, like, economic situation. And then then we have the social conservatives that are one group. So the social conservatives, what's important to them is things like, getting rid of abortion. Things like, allowing prayer to still be in school. And, like, kind of controlling how, like, children are taught in, whatever, in school and stuff like that. Gay marriage is important to them. No legalization of marijuana, for example, is important to them. These are the kind of things that are important to the social conservative movement. And also kind of, like, low taxes on people in that, the average, like the Tea Party's in this group, for example. So yeah, like that's the one group, and then we also have, on the other hand, the hawk group, and then we have the, like, the big business group. The problem is that these two groups aren't necessarily, like, inherently a group that makes sense. It's almost an alliance of convenience to a certain extent. I got the wrong spell on that guy. So yeah, it is actually almost like an alliance of convenience between the two groups, because the social conservative movement really, like, your CEOs of, like, big corporations and stuff like that, your coal companies, your big banks and things like that, they don't really care. Like, they really don't care. Like, assuming Donald Trump isn't running for president, right? Like, he's a pretty Republican businessman and all that stuff, and, what he wants is lower tax rates and less regulation in his businesses. He wants to, like, not have the EPA breathing down his back when he's like, look, I just want to open up another building here and, like, level this ground so that I can get another casino in or whatever. He just wants his business to run smoother. He wants, less regulation, less taxes, less all this other crap. He doesn't care if gay people can marry. He doesn't care if abortion is legal. He just wants his business to make money more efficiently. Gays marrying, contraceptives being offered as part of a healthcare plan, none of that matters to him. None of that matters to, Apple or Microsoft or any other, big name companies. They just want their businesses to run smoother. And they don't really care about, like, the military matters either. Now, I mean, obviously, if, we're talking about, like, Lockheed Martin or something like that, yeah, they care about military matters. It's important for them. Um, but yeah, like, Google doesn't care. Donald Trump doesn't care. Donald Trump probably doesn't want to. I mean, okay, Donald Trump is like a really bad example because he's political right now, and I'm trying to think of a another like obviously I can't think of one right now off the top of my head, but like a business that's got a like lean strongly in the Republican camp. The thing is though is that like for the most part they don't really care about those social issues. They like I said, like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, I think their name is. These people, they want more military hardware being purchased because that's what they make. They're part of the military-industrial complex. They want us to be, bringing democracy via the barrel of a gun to the rest of the world and stuff like that, because it directly affects their business. And like you kind of can't fault them on that, sort of. But that's the thing with them. So like that's what they want, and then I mean they also want like lower taxes and deregulation, but they have that additional thing that's there. And then on the social conservatives, they don't care about those things. Like the social conservatives don't really care if we're invading Iraq or not. They don't care what the corporate tax rate is. They don't care how hard it is for the EPA to make it so that you can open up like another chemical plant on the side of a river. No, they just want these other things. Now, granted, there is a little bit of like overconnect. I mentioned kind of like coal mines and coal plants and stuff like that. I mean, coal plants and coal mines do support a lot of people. Like a lot of people work into that territory. So when you're talking about like shutting down coal mines and stuff like that, and shutting down coal plants, you're putting a lot of people out of work, and you're also shutting down some businesses. So that is where there's an alignment on those topics. So like yeah, there is some overlap, but for the most part, there isn't really a lot of overlap. So the Republican Party is an alliance of these two groups that both have their own interests, so to say. And the trick is getting both groups to kind of like, for example, the whole like climate change thing isn't really important to your average Joe. Average Joe Republican doesn't really care if fuel efficiency ratings need to be increased on cars that are being produced next year. Because average Joe Republican is probably not buying a car next year. He's definitely not making cars in the coming year and things like that. So yeah, fuel efficiency standards aren't really something that matters to him, so to say. But you got to kind of try to like sell it in a way that, and that kind of leads to that other topic where it's like unreasonable, so to say, because you got to then coach climate change in terms that an average Joe can understand and then can be opposed to, because you need to keep this alliance together. What's important to one group has to keep the other group in this alliance, like, upset too, even though it really doesn't matter. So big corporations don't really care if gay people can be married or not, but they need to be part of the alliance, and they need to be convinced that gay marriage is bad for them. Now, I feel like less convincing needs to be done on the part of big businesses, because big businesses are groups of people and generally tend to be a little bit smarter than your average Joe. So a big business knows how to kind of just fake it, I think, a little bit better than your average Joe. But that's the trick, is that a lot of the things that are important to big businesses and to like the military-industrial complex need to be coached in a way to the average Joe so that they're important to him. But ultimately, like making sure Social Security is important and functional, and that gay people can't marry, and that abortion is being removed, is more important to your average Joe than denying climate science, than lowering tax rates on corporations and like, capital gain taxes and things like that. Those are all less important to the average Joe, because while they were coached and like converted to a way for him to kind of get angry about, it wasn't done as well, and no matter how you look at it, it's still like a, it's still like a representation and not the true thing. to him. But because that needs to be done in a certain way, that's part of where that I think that unreasonableness of like certain stance comes out. Wrong spell again. There we go. So yeah, it's kind of like an issue there, but the other issue is that like when the politicians, and this is part of the issue where they're like, we need to get, you know, like anti-establishment kind of stuff going on. The issue is that when politicians only have like a certain amount of political capital. Political capital, when I use that term, I'm talking about like, think of it like money that can be used to do political things, okay? Money's probably a bad example because there's so much money in politics and you guys are probably thinking something else. But think of it as like bonus points used to be able to spend on political things. So they have enough political capital to like force through one thing they want, and not a major thing, like a minor thing. They have enough political capital to force through like one minor thing. So they can do something that the social conservatives want. Maybe they can like make it harder for gays to marry or something like that. Or they can do something to like, you know, lower taxes slightly so that big corporations can make a little bit more money. The problem is that they can only do one of those things. And the two things aren't really like, you know, if the Democrats only have that same amount of political capital, they can go into either topic. And like all Democrats are kind of, while some of them are more important to them, all Democrats are sort of on board though. So let's get rid of these bears. So the point is though that like look at that honeycomb. The Democrats have that like slightest advantage there. Because all of, you know, no matter what gets done with that small amount of political capital, it will make most Democrats happy. That's not the case for the Republicans, though. You know, if you go with a socially conservative, you know, topic with your small amount of political capital, the big business interest will not be happy. If you instead go with a big business thing with your small amount of political capital, the the social conservatives won't be happy. Worse, though, is the fact that those two like members of that alliance aren't equal. Because when a politician is like, okay, look, I can only make one group happy. Do I make the group that donates massive amounts of money to me because they're a billion-dollar business, or do I make the group that doesn't donate massive amounts of money to me because they're just average people? And more importantly, because they're average people, they're way easier for me to trick in some way and then make an excuse as to why I didn't support them. Yeah, let's go with that option. So yeah, that's kind of the problem then, is that they're this like make-up alliance of sorts, where what's important to either group in this alliance isn't necessarily the same. And I'm not sure what the actual solution to that is. Like, I don't really know what the actual... I don't think there is a solution to that, but it's a structural problem that you have to know exists. And that is, I think, why we're seeing a lot of the, like, anti-establishment stuff, is because the establishment politicians have, for the most part, kind of been blowing off the social conservative movement. And they honestly have been doing that because the social conservative movement is easier to keep in line by touting their, like, social conservative positions. The social conservative movement doesn't have anywhere else to go. Like, big business can get in bed with the Democrats if really necessary, and it might not be as good as the Republicans, but it can be done. Social conservatism cannot go towards the Democrats. The Democratic Party isn't going to suddenly just be like, yeah, we've mellowed our stance on gay marriage. Yeah, maybe we can leave them as it no good. Like, that's not going to happen. So, like, the social conservatives are stuck in bed with the Republicans. They have nowhere else to go. And I think the, like, Republican, you know, like, high command understands that. Which is unfortunate, but hey, what can you do? So yeah, like, that's kind of an issue there. And at the same time, like, it's just, I don't know. You know, like, so you get that split of two groups, The one has less actual clout in the political class. So when it comes down to it, yeah, they're not getting the attention that they think they deserve. I think social conservatism is more pointless than the other types, because the other types are actually like in reference on how to like control our country and stuff like that. Social conservatism to me is like largely irrelevant. I mean, like, if gay people aren't allowed to marry inside of the United States of America, is that really going to help us with our debt levels? Are we going to somehow get like regain our dominance of the international like community? Is our deficit going to be reduced because gay people can't marry? Is like Islamic extremism going to be more easier to deal with because gay people can't marry? Like, no, none of those things really matter. Like, none of those things really matter. Is the middle class going to stop getting like hammered and shrinking because gay people can't marry? Nope, it's not. So, like, yeah, the social conservatism points, like, don't matter to me at all. And that's also part of the reason why I'm so, like, heavily in opposition to them. So, anyway, people, that's the three main weaknesses of the Republican Party. We've got changing demographics, and your solution to that is either to expand into other demographics or try to double down and increase voter turnout in your existing demographics. The double down strategy is, I believe, only going to work temporarily, but it's the one the Republican Party is currently going with, which is why Donald Trump is being more bombastic, if you will, time and time again. I don't even know where to get out of here at. And which is why you're losing even more of the moderates and of the independents with Donald Trump's words. On the other hand, the second topic is the inherent, or not the inherent unreasonableness, I still don't have a good way to explain this, but the like, at a glance, unreasonableness of some of the Republican positions and stuff like that is an issue. And I don't really know how to better change that besides, like, a better PR campaign, essentially. And the final topic is this this division in the Republican Party between the two groups that make it up. And the only solution to that I see is really to just let, like, you know, you just have to kind of better convey to your two groups. Like, you can't just allow one to kind of run over the other one, which is kind of what's happening. So anyway, people, that was, like, to me, the three main weaknesses to the Republican Party. Republicans, this was helpful to you because you're going to at least know where Democrats are going to come and hit you at. Democrats, this is telling you where to go hit the Republicans. Alright, folks, that's it for me. Like, favorite, comment, subscribe, check me out on Patreon, Twitter, and Facebook. And I will see you folks later at some point in the future when I do another one of these videos. Stop!